Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Michelson Spark Grant's Student Basic Needs Round informational webinar. Just a quick round of introductions. My name is Ryan Erickson-Kulas. I'm a program officer at the Michelson 20mm Foundation. I've been with the foundation for approximately 2 years, and I work in two main areas of our mission. So the first is textbook affordability, and then I also oversee the day-to-day operations of our Spark Grant program. And I'll throw it over to my colleague Miguel to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Miguel Leon, Program Officer for the Michelson 20mm Foundation, focusing specifically on student basic needs. Also do a little bit of digital equity work for our foundation. Been with 20mm for about 1.5 years and happy that you have joined us this morning. Looking forward to presenting some solid info for you all.
So quick overview of the webinar today. First thing we'll do is kind of give you a background around the Michelson 20mm Foundation. Next, we'll discuss the Spark Grant program in depth. We'll go over what the application process were to entail. We'll also highlight some previous awardees that we think do a good job of representing the types of projects and the types of programs that we're looking to support. And then lastly, we'll have hopefully about 15-20 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. If you do have questions throughout, please feel free to add them to the Q&A in Zoom. What we'll do is we will go through those when we wrap with this presentation. So the Michelson 20mm Foundation is founded and funded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson. He is a retired physician who made his fortune inventing medical devices and then patenting those devices. He has since retired from practicing medicine, and he devotes himself to philanthropy. We are one of a few different foundations that Dr. Michelson funds. We primarily focus on higher education. However, he also has foundations that work in animal welfare as well as medical research. The 20mm Foundation really got its start in the issue of affordability. About 10 years or so ago, Dr. Michelson saw a news article about students at Santa Ana College here in California who were unable to complete their education simply because of the high cost of textbooks. He initially established a scholarship fund for that school, but realized that it didn't necessarily address the root of the issue. And so that's how we got started as a foundation, really around sort of affordability, textbook affordability. So the goal of the Michelson 20mm Foundation is to ensure that there are equitable post-secondary opportunities that lead to meaningful careers for all. We are always looking to support entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and organizations that are looking to close that opportunity gap. And before we get started about talking about the Spark Grant program, I wanted to give a very brief overview of the programs that we have within the foundation that do that work. So the first program I wanted to talk about is the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property. As I mentioned, Dr. Michelson was an inventor and made his fortune in patenting those inventions. And so he's very passionate about bringing intellectual property education to the students, entrepreneurs, and schools to ensure that they have the skills, they have the knowledge set to be able to capitalize on their IP. We also do impact investing work. This is primarily through our Michelson Runway Accelerator, where we generally look at ed tech for-profit companies that are mission aligned with our work and looking to reinvent post-secondary education and make it easier for students to complete college. Some of our access and success initiatives include the area that I work in, so the Open Educational Resources Initiative. There, what we're looking to do is eliminate the high cost of instructional materials that are often a financial barrier for students to be successful within post-secondary education. And we primarily focus on open educational resources. These are freely licensed instructional materials that students, faculty can utilize, remix at no cost, primarily available online. A couple of years ago, we also started our Smart Justice initiative, where we looked at the intersection of the criminal justice system and higher education. And we really look to bring educational opportunities to those that are involved in the justice system, whether they be currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. And Miguel, I'll let you talk a little bit about our digital equity work.
Thank you, Ryan. So in terms of our digital equity work, historical and systemic inequities have consistently limited the educational opportunities available to poor students of color. And these opportunities are further limited by the disproportionate impact of digital inequity on this population. A lack of access to devices, tech support, reliable low-cost internet, and digital literacy stifles African-American and Latinx students' ability to meaningfully engage in higher education and the workforce. So beyond higher education, digital inequity has negative implications on poor people of color's ability to access healthcare, seek employment, and even engage in our democracy. So in response, 20MM has so far partnered with the LA Community College District in their efforts to help students transition to remote learning and launched Connecting California, which is a virtual convening series, which aims to increase awareness across our philanthropic community of the impacts of digital inequity, as well as explore case studies of proven models and solutions implemented in state and around the country. Our convenings also intend to provide a forum for philanthropic leaders to explore and redefine their role and relationship to the digital divide with an eye to both near-term needs made more urgent by COVID-19, as well as necessary long-term solutions that can sustainably close the digital divide once and for all. We're hoping to, through our convenings, cohere a strong coalition that is committed to solving digital inequity in California specifically. That's the brunt of our digital equity work. And on the next slide, student basic needs specifically for us is this, right? Work that includes efforts that mitigate the impact of the real cost of college on students, including the non-tuition costs that cause students to face food insecurity, housing insecurity, homelessness, and overall financial instability. I do want to add much credit for our thinking around student basic needs goes to our friends and partners throughout the SPN community, including the Hope Center for College Community and Justice, Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Grab and her leadership there. For us, and I believe for many of us working in the space, has laid the groundwork and framework on how to move forward, all while ensuring that students are front and center in everything that we do. Our work in this space has centered on tackling the shortcomings of emergency student aid management and distribution, as well as educating and informing policymakers of all the different challenges faced by today's students. We'll share a little bit more about some specific grants that we've made when we share grantee examples to give you a better sense of what sort of work has caught our eye in the past.
So now that we've talked a little bit about what we do as a foundation, we want to provide an overview of the Spark Grant program. So the idea for the Spark Grant program is to introduce a just-in-time grant-giving process that really funds urgent needs that organizations would have that they wouldn't be able to get funded by going through the traditional timeline. Typically, we look to respond to applications within 15 business days or 3 weeks. And we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about sort of what that mechanism looks like. In terms of this round, we will be opening the round on October 22nd, and we will have the call for LOIs open for a 3-week period. So organizations can apply over the course of that 3 weeks, and we'll be reviewing proposals on a rolling basis until total funding is distributed. There's no specific deadline to wait. Anytime over that 3-week period, you can submit an LOI. And again, we'll talk a little bit more in depthly about what that process looks like later in the presentation. Miguel?
Thank you, Ryan. Continuing our overview, the Spark Grant program is available to US-based nonprofits. For this round of funding, we've decided to focus on orgs that are doing work in California. Those not doing work in California won't be eligible for this opportunity. And a quick note as well, we wanted to highlight the fact that we won't be funding initiatives that would result in direct assistance to students during this round, such as emergency student aid, laptops or hotspots for remote learning, or food and housing vouchers. We know that these resources are extremely important and critical for student success, but we decided to leverage our funding to affect broader systemic change for this round. We're also looking to focus this round on developing new partnerships in the space. We're hoping to fund orgs we have not previously supported by a Michelson Spark Grant. And so if you're a current or past grantee that is interested in submitting a proposal, please reach out to us directly.
So we're now going to talk a little bit about what we look to evaluate when reviewing proposals. And we have sort of 6 different dimensions: baseline criteria, focus areas, alignment, potential impact of the grant, measurability of impact, long-term organizational sustainability, and then the scalability. And we're going to go into each of these different dimensions a little bit more in-depthly. So in terms of baseline criteria, our grants are up to $25,000. And generally, we are looking to fund a project or a self-contained milestone of some sort. It could be an inflection point. It could be a partnership with a new organization. It could be a new proof of concept where you're looking to prove out a pilot that then potentially has the ability to scale. Some things that we do have restrictions on in terms of our funding. We don't fund general operating expenses, so things like rent, utility, servers cost, ongoing inventory. We do, however, fund staff time. So if there was a new project, a new initiative, and you wanted to apply and say X percentage of this staff person's time will be allocated to it, that is something that our grant funding can be utilized for. And Miguel, I'll let you talk a little bit more about kind of the focus areas, because I think this is the real meat and potatoes of what we're looking to try to do with this round.
Sure, thanks. So in terms of focus areas, one of our thoughts is around increasing student awareness and access to SNAP benefits and other public social services and resources within systems of higher education. It's pretty well known that more students are eligible for SNAP than actually receive this resource. So we want to hear from folks doing innovative work in letting students know about this resource and making it easier for them to apply. SNAP is an existing safety net that students oftentimes even self-disqualify for. So we want to hear what you all are doing to bridge the gap towards those benefits. We're also looking to strengthen efforts within higher ed systems that meet the basic needs of college students excluded from receiving CARES funding. When CARES dollars came down the pipeline, there were confusing messages coming from the Department of Education as to who could get CARES funds and who couldn't. And this left many institutions in a lurch, and many students in a lurch, wondering how they would assist those populations excluded from receiving these dollars. We want to hear about how those, we want to hear about those innovative pivots that help some of those most underrepresented students in higher ed. We're looking to support efforts to educate policymakers about student basic needs issues and solutions. Educating policymakers for us is extremely key, ensuring that they hear firsthand about how students are put in precarious positions. Having to decide between a meal, textbooks, or tuition is important because policymakers are the ones who can ultimately use their positions to advance policy to change these conditions. So tell us about the work that you've done in that arena. Research that addresses glaring gaps in emergency student aid, including how institutions of higher learning manage and distribute aid dollars, and how these dollars impact student retention, persistence, and graduation. That research can focus on general emergency student aid funds, CARES funding received from the federal government, or funding from philanthropic foundations. Although emergency student aid is critical to helping students in need, there are many shortcomings in the management and distribution of said funds that, if addressed, can help students even more. And we know that these shortcomings aren't the fault of folks pivoting to even set up ESA funds, but rather a symptom of broader issues. And so we want to see the innovative ways folks have established to get ESA funds to students in a cheaper, quicker, and easier way. Especially key is any information garnered from said efforts, because ultimately knowing whether or not those funds contributed to students' persistence and graduation is an area that I think higher ed in general is still working on improving. Providing innovative solutions that target students experiencing homelessness, parenting students, and students in the foster system. These three populations are often the underrepresented of the underrepresented, and efforts specifically assisting them are few and far between, but amazing from what we've heard. So tell us about what you are doing to establish efforts that address the sometimes compounded and specific challenges faced by these populations. And lastly, increasing the understanding of an accurate definition of the real cost of college, including the impact of non-tuition costs on students. We all know that the cost of college is more than just tuition, but many of our systems still function under the notion that if you have tuition covered, then you'll be just fine, which is not the case. So efforts that highlight how affordability should be seen through a broader lens and assistance to students should be expanded to help cover those costs is critical for us in moving the dial on student basic needs.
So again, I think those focus areas are really, those six are the meat and potatoes of kind of what we're looking to do. And what we do is we ask organizations to identify which of the focus areas their project would address. And of course, there may be an opportunity where a project were to address, multiple, maybe one, two of those. It's pretty rare that we've seen projects. In fact, I don't think we've had a proposal where, one has hit all six. This is not necessarily a, check all the boxes and, it improves your chances. Really, we wanted to provide a menu of options for organizations to submit proposals. Moving forward in terms of what we're looking for and what we evaluate. So obviously we're looking at the potential impact of the grant. How many people, both in the short term as well as in the long term, will be impacted by the grant? How likely is it to be successful? So making sure that we have a good understanding of the populations that will be served. And this is something that you should be incorporating into your LOI. Again, measurability of impact. So it's easy to say, X amount of students will be served. How are you going to tell us that? Is it a survey that gets conducted both before and after? Are you looking at institutional data? We also, really want to get a better sense of what is the timeline? How many students are going to be affected over what period of time? So this is another area that we'll be looking at as we evaluate the proposal. Long-term organizational stability. So we're interested in learning sort of who is the current team members of the organization and who are the people who will be doing the work in and around this project. What partners do you have as an organization? Are there other nonprofits that you'll be utilizing to help to advertise a program that you would be doing with our grant funding? Do you have other funders that you collaborate on this type of work? What is your revenue streams as an organization? How is it primarily foundational support? Do you do individual fundraising? We want to get a better sense of how you as an organization overall sort of sustain the work that you do. And then Miguel, I'll let you talk a little bit about sort of scalability of the project, because I think this is a little unique for this particular round in terms of the level of impact that we're looking to have.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and definitely looking for that systems level change. Definitely macro efforts whose impact is going to be felt regionally, statewide, or system-wide. We know that there's tremendous efforts going on at the campus level to address student basic needs, a lot of food pantries, a lot of emergency student aid funds, partnerships with food banks, etc. But if impact is limited to one specific location or one campus population, unless you have sort of a sense or a model of how that's going to be taken to scale, we would want to hear more from folks that sort of have that lens, right? How is it going to not just impact one community college and its students, but rather the entire California community college system, not just one CSU or UC, but the entire system as a whole. And this could be partnerships, programs, models, again, that go beyond one campus, one population of students, and go statewide or system-wide.
Again, one thing I'll add to this is we definitely have in the past some interest, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these examples later, of projects that are focused more on a specific institution, but have the potential to scale up to be a system-wide initiative. So perhaps it's a pilot project that you're starting at a particular campus, but you feel like after it is proven out, there's an avenue to sort of go across the whole system. That would be something that we'd be interested in. We would just want to get a better sense of sort of how you see that scale occurring and over what period of time. So we'll talk a little bit about now the actual application process and how you will be applying. So the link to our website, it's 20mm.org/spark-grants. That's where you'll go. There right now, most of you have probably already seen, there's a pretty comprehensive overview of this particular round. This recording, so we are recording this webinar. It will be sent out to the attendees, and it will also be listed at the bottom of this webpage. But our portal will open on October 22nd, and as I mentioned, it will remain open for a 3-week period. This is a screenshot from an earlier round, just so that you can see, but you'll go to the website and you'll hit submit a proposal, and then that will bring you to the actual portal to submit your LOI. Similar to our Smart Justice round that we had earlier this year, we will be using Submittable as our grant management platform. So some things to be aware of in and around Submittable. One, you'll have to create an account with Submittable. 2, please make sure that you whitelist Submittable in your email client. Most of the communication that we will be doing will be occurring via Submittable, letting you know if a proposal advances, letting you know if a proposal has not advanced, requests for additional information. What we will do is we'll actually have a link as to how to whitelist Submittable in your email client in the LOI. So as you're filling it out, you can click on that. And that will show you how to do it. But we had some issues in previous rounds where organizations were not receiving communication because their filters didn't have Submittable set to receive. So just wanted to make sure that people are able to do that. And then lastly, if you're having technical issues with the platform And if you are having issues submitting a proposal or filling it in for whatever reason, of course, you can always reach out to us. But I would recommend also, as you do reach out to us, copying support@submittable.com, because they're going to be able to answer any sort of technical issues that are occurring. We often get requests, especially as it gets close to the portal closing towards the last day or two, of people saying, oh, hey, I can't access this, or I'm having issues with that, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would just encourage organizations to get on Submittable early, make sure that they're comfortable with the platform, and make sure that there are no issues on their side. Miguel, you want to talk a little bit about our committee?
Thanks, Ryan. So our committee is made up of the leadership at Michelson 20mm Foundation, and Ryan and I. So we have Phil Kim, our president, who's been with Dr. Michelson in various capacities for the past decade. We also have Mayra Lombera, our VP of Programs and Operations, who's been with the foundation nearly a decade as well. Has been in the classroom experience front and center with students, and both Phil and Mayra are co-founders of Michelson Runway, which Ryan mentioned earlier. We have our host, Ryan Erickson Kulas, Program Officer at 20mm, and myself, who will all be reviewing applications that are submitted.
Clearly, quarantine has not been good for my beard. So what does the evaluation process look like for you as a grantee and then for us as a committee? So after an LOI is submitted, we will do an initial assessment. And for context, the LOI, other than some demographical information, really it's one question, it's 650 words, and it's just asking you to present an abstract in and around your proposal. So we'll actually have copies of both the LOI and the full application available on our website early next week for organizations to start downloading if they want to start prepping for the round opening on October 22nd. Again, when we email out the list of people who have registered with this recording, we will also ensure that we're pointing you towards both the copy of the LOI as well as the copy of the application. Within 6 business days, we will notify you if your LOI has moved forward in the process. If that is the case, we will invite you to complete a longer full application. Within this application, we ask more specifics about your organization's staffing capacity and demographics, any sort of grant funding that you have received in the past. We'll also have very specific questions on that application based on information that you submitted within the LOI. Excuse me. After those full applications are submitted, we will advance those full applications that we feel are strong contenders to a finalist stage, which will be a follow-up phone conversation with both Miguel and myself. The goal is to have a decision overall, again, within 15 business days of your LOI submission. So a relatively quick process. We really want to make sure that we're funding initiatives that are urgent and that can benefit from a quick infusion of philanthropy. I will say in terms of, and actually I'll move forward, this is a visual representation of the timeline. In terms of numbers, I think our Smart Justice round last month, 2 months ago, was a good example of volume and as well as quality of application. So that round, we received approximately 140 proposals. Of those 140, I think we advanced about 25% or so forward to that application phase. And then I would say in the application phase, for those that advanced to that phase, probably about 50% of those advance to the finalist phase. So just sort of giving you some context around numbers and what we do. I think for this particular round, we are probably looking to fund between 3 and 6 grants, probably closer to the 4 to 5 range. Again, it sort of depends on amounts requested by organizations. We have organizations who may apply for $10,000, $15,000, or for the full $25,000. So in wrapping up, we'll talk a little bit about some of the past grantees that we have awarded through our grant giving. And first, we wanted to highlight specifically student basic needs grantees. And I'll let Miguel touch on each of these projects and how they align well with our mission.
Thank you, Ryan. Quick note before I get started, we do see your questions in the Q&A. We are tracking those and we'll get to them shortly. So in terms of previous partners, the Hope Center, in conjunction with Believe in Students, is a previous partner that we funded to provide technical assistance to institutions, state and federal governments to advance a comprehensive set of policies for low-income students' success. That includes their ability to access public benefits such as SNAP, and also trying to identify different state policies that can make post-secondary education more affordable and remove barriers to access for students. And they'll be putting that together, or the outcomes of those efforts together, in a report coming up in June. Want to highlight specifically their work in putting information out that would support students directly, and also institutions trying to help students during the COVID-19 crisis that we're all in. Some tremendous resources around how to pivot for students and for institutions. Swipe Out Hunger is another one of our current partners and grantees, one of the leading nonprofits in addressing hunger among college students. We specifically funded them for a student advocacy campaign where students were able to engage campus administrators to ensure that they were distributing and promoting the emergency aid to students that came down specifically through CARES funding with an eye towards equity. Again, any efforts that put students front and center and also communicates their needs directly to decision makers. Extremely important for us. Really happy that we are partnering with them in those efforts. And the Foundation for California Community Colleges, another one of our partners. They specifically help the community college system across the state. They support them through a wide range of partnerships and do a bit of fundraising for them as well. But in terms of our grant, the FCCC was hoping to, or is hoping to, ensure, again, the more equitable management and distribution of emergency student aid funds. They have partnered with Equity, Michelson 20mm portfolio company, to vet Equity's platform and make it available to all campuses across the state. And that platform pretty much automates the emergency student aid application process, making it quicker, easier, and cheaper for students to access those funds. They can apply within minutes, get decisions made within hours, and funds in their bank accounts within a day. So extremely happy to, again, play in that intersection of ed tech and higher ed.
Great, and then I'll talk a little bit about some other awardees that are not student basic needs related per se, but I think do a good job of encapsulating sort of the spirit of the Spark Grant program and what we're looking to try to implement. The first grantee that I'll discuss is the Education Trust West. They're actually our first two-time Spark grantee. This organization was funded in our very first round of the Spark Grant program, which was in early 2019. And with that funding, they actually developed a California Digital Financial Aid Awareness Toolkit. Legislation was recently passed in California that high school students, seniors, needed to be educated prior to graduation around financial aid, as well as FAFSA, California Dream application. So there was this requirement put on by the state. And so what EdTrust West did was fill the implementation gap. They created a toolkit. They did research across various districts. They really looked at districts where, historically there was low socioeconomic status, but where there were high FAFSA application rates, and looking at what those schools, what those districts were doing to educate their students in and around that, and then taking that resource and distributing it statewide to schools, districts. They had a variety of partnerships for distribution. I think that's a great example of one, timely funding where, this law had just passed, there was this need for this research, as well as the scalability of a project. The second grant that we gave to them was in our COVID round earlier this year, where they performed a survey of sort of COVID-related needs for California higher education students, looking at what their institutions were providing them, how effective those were, and then actually just released yesterday, if you go to our Twitter, you can find a link to this, they released a digital map that looks at the gaps of digital access throughout the state of California, particularly focused on higher education. So again, sort of a statewide resource. They were able to pull data to provide something that really, I think, is a great resource for decision makers as they're looking at how to address the problem of the digital divide. U.S. Public Interest Research Group, or U.S. PIRG, is another great example of a project that really scaled. So we funded a report of theirs, a research report that looked at the textbook industry's new automatic billing practice. They call it inclusive access. We like to call it automatic billing. But essentially, it is a new revenue model where the cost of instructional materials are automatically added to a student's tuition. This report was actually released in February, and since then there have been a wide variety of uses of this research. I know it's been utilized in class action lawsuits that are looking at some monopoly type practices by publishers. Here in California, there was actually legislation introduced in and around inclusive access and sort of putting curtailments around that practice to really protect student consumers. So again, another example of a project that was a research project, but had the ability to sort of grow and scale based on the work that was being done both by PIRG and other partners of the research. ISKME is another one of our COVID round grantees. So as in the spring, all higher education shifted remote, and as we know, that's kind of looks to be the case for the foreseeable future. We wanted to provide a resource to faculty, administrators within the California community college system as to how to utilize open educational resources as they shift into an online and a remote education environment. So what ISKME did was they did research of about 5 different districts that were leaders within distance education prior to COVID, as well as OER, and looked to see how they were incorporating OER. They've put together a guidebook, which actually will be released within the next month, that provides many different entry points for faculty to get involved in open educational resources. They'll also be having a series of webinars talking about some of these practices. The audience for this is kind of statewide faculty. So again, it's a project that has the scale of impacting faculty throughout the CCC system. Actually, we just announced yesterday on our blog the awardees for our Smart Justice round, which wrapped up in August. And one of the ones that I wanted to highlight for this call is the University of California, Irvine. So we funded a project that will be the first of its kind. It's a degree granting program within the UC system that is situated in a California state prison. So this will be the first time in the state that a person who is incarcerated has access to a UC bachelor's degree. I think that this project is one example and something that I wanted to mention on this webinar. Our funding is sort of one part of this larger project. We are open to that with proposals and with projects. We would want to get a sense of how large overall the budget is. So, you know, if you're saying our $25,000 is part of a $75,000 project, we would just kind of want to get a better sense of, you know, what is that overall budget? Where are you in securing the funds? But we are open to having our funding, you know, in collaboration with other revenue streams for a project. And then the last project that I'll talk about briefly, and again, this was just announced yesterday from our Smart Justice round, and it's a collaboration between the Academic Senate of the CCC system as well as the Foundation for California Community Colleges. And this grant will look to fund training materials and modules for a statewide training for faculty that are teaching in prison settings. So the idea is giving a resource and giving professional development to the 250 plus faculty that are teaching in prisons in California. This project also will be openly licensed, and that is one thing that you will see in our materials is asking whether you're open to having you know, your project be openly licensed. We realize that might not be the case for every project, but the idea is that this resource will not only be a benefit to faculty within California, but being openly licensed, faculty who are teaching in prisons in Nevada, in New Hampshire, in Mississippi, can all utilize Remix and edit these questions. So we'll pause there and we'll start answering some questions in the chat. Before we do, I'll leave this page up. I just wanted to mention, here are Miguel and my email addresses. If you have questions that haven't been addressed on this call or as you're working through the proposal, please feel free to reach out to us. We want to be here as a resource. We're more than happy to chat with organizations or respond via email. If you're kicking around an idea, but you don't know if it's quite a fit, we're more than happy in advance of you submitting a proposal to reach out to us and say, you know, hey, here's what we're thinking. Would this be a good fit? And then we can kind of let you know, yes, absolutely. We think that we'd be interested in reviewing it. Can you please provide some additional details around X, Y, and Z to sort of give us a holistic picture? Or on the other hand, you know, we don't think this is necessarily the best fit for this round, and that way it sort of saves you the time of going through and actually submitting a formal proposal. So we're always here to be able to provide feedback to organizations. The other thing that I forgot to mention, and perhaps this is something that will be incorporated into the questions, in terms of timeline of the projects. Generally, we are looking for projects that have sort of a 6 to 12 month time frame. Of course, we do have some flexibility. We've had some longer grants that have been, you know, 18 months or something like that. But, you know, in the spirit of sort of quick infusions of cash and quick grant giving, you know, this is not and obviously at $25,000, you know, this isn't a 2-year grant per se opportunity. So with that, I will pause. Miguel, I think just because I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see the Q&A. Like I see that we have 17 questions, but when I click on it, it doesn't answer. No so worries. Maybe you can read them aloud, and then that way it'll also be captured on the recording, and then we can kind of answer them.
Most definitely. I've pulled them up here. Quick shout out to Rachel Hemler, our colleague, also compiling and helping us track the questions. First question is from Zubaida. how has COVID-19 impacted your work, as you were already focusing on digital equity and most of us in higher education are doing remote digital instruction here in California for this academic year? COVID really spurred our dipping our toe into the digital equity waters. We were partnering with LACCD prior to COVID hitting, and they had to pivot, so we pivoted alongside them. They transitioned to remote learning, and we decided to, along with other funders, help them and LACCD students with laptops and hotspots to make sure they could continue their studies. But that really sort of snowballed into a broader conversation about the fact that digital inequity existed prior to COVID. COVID exacerbated it, and we needed more long-term solutions. So we began to dialogue with our philanthropic community and have now become sort of, or positioned ourselves as the flag bearers of the issue amongst our sister foundations. So trying to educate and inform them of the different nuances so that we can all pivot collectively as a community. Again, to, yes, address the short term, but look to mid and long-term solutions. Hope that answers that question, Zubaida. But we're excited of the path that we're going down in terms of digital equity. Very fruitful conversations and potential partnerships that are burgeoning. We have another one from Zubaida. Do you support other food insecurity work apart from focusing on SNAP/CalFresh? Would have loved an example, Zubaida, but I'd say yes, if it's helping students focus on their studies, helping them persist and graduate. Tell us about that work. Tell us about your partnership or program, a model or curriculum that you piece together, and how that's, again, impacting students in a positive way. And we'll definitely take a look at that, and happy as Ryan mentioned, to hop on a call to brainstorm with you on that. Marjorie asks, can some of the money go toward CARES students? One of the focus areas specifically speaks to students excluded from CARES funding. And so if it's funds or a program that helps students in general, that's perfectly fine. I'm assuming that's sort of the underlying theme of the question. If it isn't specific to CARES or students that were excluded from CARES. So if that's the case, then that answer would be a yes.
And I would add just some clarity. If it is sort of, can dollars go directly to students? Again, to reiterate, that's kind of not necessarily something that we're looking to fund for this round. But general sort of, programmatic support, things like that, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. We have a question from Sam. Who specifically are you all hoping to target for funding? It sounds like direct service providers, those who provide food, housing, and academic support to students experiencing homelessness and hunger, are outside of the scope here. Not necessarily, Sam. If you're a nonprofit organization that is providing much needed resources, services, and programs to students, we'd love to hear from you. Keep in mind, though, the desire to create that systems level change. If you have a program or concept that you've been working on for years and you think it's a model of practice to be shared more broadly, let us know about it. Some of the most important work is going on the ground in organizations that directly interact with underrepresented students. So not excluded. Think about scalability, though.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, perhaps you've been doing a program at, one particular school for quite some time. Now you're looking to scale that to another district or two other districts, and you sort of have a long-term growth trajectory of being in, every school or whatever that may be. I think that would probably be a really good example of what you're just talking about, Miguel.
Great. We have one from Eric and Enoch, would a 3-year evaluation project focused on the impact that housing support has on academic success for homeless community college and CSU students be considered? It sounds like music to my ears, definitely, as the program officer focusing on student basic needs. I think food insecurity gets a lot of play, so to speak, within the student basic needs conversation, and homelessness for the most part is sort of more of that long-term play, right? And it's a bit of a bigger beast to tackle. So if there is an effort that's trying to shed light on the fact that yes, if you address homelessness and yes, you provide resources or housing, these are the outcomes. I think definitely something that we would consider.
Yeah, and I would say, we mentioned sort of what the general time frame is for grants, but of course there are exceptions. And if you were to say in a proposal, we want to focus on a 3-year study because we only feel like we can get the research that we need and the data that we need over the course of that amount of time. Totally open to that. I think it would just be kind of explaining, why that timeline is why it is and kind of why it's important from your perspective.
Grant, we have a question from Mark. Will this initiative consider funding for systems/programs that support recent rising high school grads, pathway to higher ed, or is it specific to current college students? Great question. Not sure that we contemplated the transition, but if it's something that will help students persist and access, by addressing student basic needs, I'd say yes, but happy to have a further, deeper conversation with you. Feel free to send us an email to brainstorm and make sure that there is enough overlap for you to, actually dedicate time to throwing your hat into this SBN round.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I would think, we'd want to get a clear understanding of sort of how whatever program or whatever initiative you would be proposing would really ease the pathway and help students access higher education.
Question from Jennifer. Might formerly incarcerated and system impacted students be included in that list on innovative solutions? We thought of including that specific population as well, but given that we closed out a Smart Justice specific round last month, I'd say it wouldn't be sort of front and center in terms of the SBN conversation.
Yeah, and I would say if you are interested in learning a little bit more about our Smart Justice work, you can email our colleague Emily Blake, who's the program officer who oversees that work. Her email is easy, as is all of ours. It's just emily@20mm.org. So EMILY@20mm.org.
And we have a question from Carla. Can projects focus on multiple of these focus areas? If there's overlap, great, definitely. Yeah, if there's.
Yeah, I think we probably addressed that one earlier.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. An anonymous attendee: is the focus of college students /students in higher education? We work with transitional age youth, but the majority of them are in high school. So transition to college/university, yes. Definitely something we'd consider. Access is an area of work that is part of our portfolio. Keep in mind, again, scalability, regional, statewide, system-wide impact. We would take a look at those. And we have a question from Eric. Is there equal priority on 4-year/bachelor degree granting institutions and the CC system, or is there preference between the two? I'd say no, there's no preference. I think for the most part, our partnerships have emerged at the sort of community college level, but we're always exploring ways that we can partner with UCs, CSUs, and other actors across the state. We have a question from Alexis. Who do we send our LOI to?
Yep, so that will be through the Submittable portal. And again, that will be live on October 22nd. And then we'll have copies to download just so that y'all can start like working on potential proposals early next week. And again, that will be sent out via email when we send out the recording of this webinar.
We had a question from Amber, which I think you answered earlier, Ryan. Approximately how many grantees do you plan to award this round? 3 to 6, I think, was the response, yep. With maybe 4 to 5 being the number we'll land on.
Yes.
Let's see. Question from Alexis. Also, the LOI should be no longer than 650 words, correct?
Yes, so there will be a few additional questions, name, website of your organization, year you were founded. I think we asked a question along, how long did it take you to complete this LOI? But the main, I would say 80% of the actual work that you'll be doing on the LOI will be a 650 word, essentially abstract around what the project is.
Great. We have a question from Karaya. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Can you send me specific project examples that we can apply for?
So I'm not exactly sure what that question was entailing. I think, again, the focus areas are probably a good place to start. So if you do work around any of those 6 various focus areas, and then I think we probably provided some examples of, the types of work and the types of project that we've funded in the past. So hopefully that answers the question. But again, if it didn't, please go ahead and reach out to us via email.
Yes, always available. Another question, if your grant does not include research, will it reduce your chances of being considered? Not necessarily, I'd say. I think we always want to get a good sense of sort of like outcomes and on persistence and graduation, but the focus areas were sort of general guidelines. We know that there's one research specific, and you don't have to sort of overlap all 6. If it's one, if it's a project working on one of those 6, that's fine. But as much outcomes that you can generate and share as possible would be great. But research specific, I'd say no, it doesn't reduce your chances of being considered. We have Sam saying hello to Enoch. I guess folks in the space know each other. Enoch, know that Sam is waving at you. Anonymous attendee, what amount / range did you fund research projects like EdTrust West and US PERG?
So I believe those were both within the $15,000 to $25,000 range. I know there were some differences between the 2 projects. I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but ballpark that's what it is.
Great. Let's see. Marjorie's clarifying her earlier question. Students excluded from CARES Act. You said no direct support. So yes, so if there's an effort, a system-wide effort to help students that were excluded from CARES, we want to hear about it. We know a lot of organizations and institutions pivoted and partnered amongst each other to provide that direct support, like ESA or food or housing. So the funds for this SBN round aren't necessarily going to go directly to those students, but the efforts that help them. So it's not going to go toward an emergency student aid fund or housing or food vouchers, but efforts that supported those students that were excluded, yes.
And I know we're at time. I think Miguel and I can probably stay on to answer some of these remaining questions. For those of you that do need to hop, we will again be sending out this recording. So you'll get those questions answered in the recording as well, but we'll stay on until we've answered the remaining questions in the Q&A.
I think we have about 6 more.
Perfect.
Would a project looking to create a curriculum to work with homeless youth be aligned? Looking to design a program to engage youth experiencing homelessness in education. while also addressing the barriers they face while navigating education and homelessness? Yes. Martel, yes. Short answer, definitely. Um, let's see, we don't work within, Martel expanded a little bit. We don't work within the UCCC system, yet we work with the youth who navigate those systems and experience homelessness within our education program with TAY. Our system would be homelessness DMA, LA County, etc. efforts on homelessness. Yes, Martel. And if you want to discuss that further, drop us a line.
Yeah, I would say, there doesn't necessarily need to be a, formal partnership with the CCC system or with the CSU system. But I think as long as your work is doing work that impacts students that are within, the California higher education ecosystem or are, close to transitioning or assisting them in transitioning into that ecosystem.
Right. We answered Amanda's question about making the responses accessible post webinar. We have a question from Sam. Let's see. Is there a minimum number of students that need to be impacted by the proposed project for it to be considered? Not a specific number, but if it's multi-campus, regional, statewide, system-wide, that's what we're looking for. Definitely that macro level work that can be taken to scale. Another Sam, many thanks. All right, just Sam giving kudos. Sam, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And let's see, Zubaida, another quick message of kudos. And the last one, where do we submit our LOI? That one's come up again, right?
Yep. So again, if you go to 20mm.org, at the very top, you should see a link to something that says Spark Grants. Right now, there is a button that will take you to the link to register for the webinar. But early next week, that button will be replaced, and it will be replaced with the portal to the LOI. That essentially will bring you to Submittable. You would create an account on Submittable. You would submit through there. Again, that Submittable portal will open on October 22nd.
Thanks, Ryan. And the last question, why only the state of California? Great question.
Yeah, and I can address that. I think we as a foundation have been going through a bit of a strategic planning process as well as kind of a review process of the grants that we've received in the past, or excuse me, that we've given in the past. And in previous rounds, we have received a decent amount of proposals for work that's done outside of California. And over the course of the growth of the Spark Grant program, it's become pretty apparent that the committee, as well as just the foundation in general, generally supports organizations that are within California. So for example, in the previous round that we did, the Smart Justice round, I believe 8 of the 10 finalists for that round, or that made it to the final 10, were doing work or based within California. And we really want to kind of be clear with what our goals are and what our expectations are, so that we're sort of cutting down on the amount of time that nonprofits who aren't the best fit for us are putting in work to submitting a grant. We realize that your all's time is better spent sort of doing the work on the ground. And so kind of with the history that we've had in terms of the funding that we've given out and sort of what our interests are, this is the first time that I think we've explicitly said that within the Spark Grant process. But again, it's one, sort of being a little bit more representative of the work that we actually have funded and probably intend to fund, and then 2, cutting down the work that organizations are doing in advance when we may not be interested. I will say, just to clarify, and I think we've mentioned this before, but if you're based outside of California, but you're doing work within California, or your work would impact California, you would be considered eligible.
Great. And thank you for that response from Amanda, Ryan. That is all.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully y'all found this to be helpful and informative. As we mentioned, next week, this recording, as well as the copies of the LOI and the application, will be released. And then we'll start accepting proposals on October 22nd. But in advance of that, if you have a question, if you have anything that you'd like to discuss with us, please feel free to reach out to Miguel or myself. And we look forward to connecting with you, and we look forward to reviewing proposals for this round. So thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.